Reverend William Will, the Perthshire teenager whose religious zeal led him to become Otago's second Presbyterian minister and served the church at East Taieri for 45 years. Imagine, if you will, two young students on holiday from their studies for the Presbyterian ministry and on a walking tour of the Highlands in 1848. Well, somewhere near here, the famous Burkes of Aberfeldy, one of them, William Will, reached a decision that he would commit the rest of his life to serving the church in the colonies. And that resolve came to fruition in 1853 when he was one of two ministers to be sent out from Scotland to Otago. At 29 and 34 respectively, Will and his colleague William Bannerman were to be younger colleagues for the ageing pioneer cleric Reverend Thomas Burns. Now, Will came from pretty humble circumstances, born here at Kinrossie in Perthshire, a younger son in a family of 8, the son of a rural tradesman, but at least, as per most Scottish children of that era, he would have received a good basic education at his local parish school. As a teenager, he was a fascinated witness to the great rupture in the Church of Scotland in 1843 that gave rise to the new Free Church, events in which his own local parish minister played a key part. But that then meant that all the Free Church adherents had to leave this beautiful old parish church in Collis and move to a much plainer new one in nearby Kinrossie. Fired with religious zeal, William joined the Free Church rebels and determined on a career in the church himself. Reaching the educational standard to train for ministry was a significant challenge. At the age of 20, Will returned to study, paying for lessons in Greek and Latin at the Dundee Grammar School. Highly rated by his teacher for his scholarly potential, he then came here to Edinburgh, where he took classes at its university and at the Free Church Theological Hall, newly established here on this impressive spot looking out over Edinburgh's new town. To support himself, he taught next door at the Free Church School. Subsequently employed to teach Latin and Greek to the daughter of an Edinburgh surgeon here in fashionable London Street in Edinburgh's new town, Will fell in love with his pupil, Louisa Wishart. They were married in September 1853, immediately after his ordination as a Presbyterian minister. A month later, they set sail for Otago on the Stately, along with the Reverend William Bannerman. Their arrival was big news in pioneer Dunedin, where Thomas Burns had held the fort alone since 1848. The two new ministers would now relieve him of pastoral care for the whole region, from Dunedin south to Foveaux Strait. Will taking the Taieri Plain and Bannerman the sparsely populated region southwards. Riding out of Dunedin on a dray along the half-formed road to the Taieri, William and the 6 months pregnant Louisa got a sense of the challenges ahead when a bridge collapsed under them and a crate of their crockery and William's top hat tumbled into Abbott's Creek. Their driver, William Jaffray, promptly retrieved the ruined hat to use as a cosy nest for his chickens. This was definitely not Edinburgh. Louisa, the well-educated surgeon's daughter, then had to give birth to her first child in a primitive hut on the slopes of Saddle Hill, bunking down with the Cullens of Orfero for a whole year until a manse had been built for them. As pioneer families moved out onto the Taieri Plain, gradually draining its swamps to form a patchwork of farms, William's work as their pastor fulfilled all his dreams of colonial service. It involved hard slog, walking big distances to minister to far-flung communities as far afield as North Otago and West Taieri. But gradually, the combined church-school structure of the early days gave way to this fine building designed by R.A. Lawson, which opened in 1870. And the pioneering phase gave way to a more established way of life.
There were heartbreaks along the way, especially the sudden death of Louisa Will in 1871 from a brain hemorrhage, and then the death of William's second wife, Mary Callender, within a year of their marriage in 1874, Mary dying in childbirth. He married a third time in 1879, but again outlived Annie Jardine, who died in 1903.
Will's 4 children were a source of joy to him, however. One son following into the ministry, 2 others becoming doctors, and his only daughter, a university graduate and secondary school teacher.
William Will was very much an old-school Presbyterian minister, a forceful preacher and a highly influential figure among his parishioners, but one who held himself slightly aloof by virtue of his position. Over the years, however, he came to represent the more progressive wing of the Otago Church, especially in theological debates and in the decades-long controversy over uniting the Otago-founded Free Church with the second Presbyterian body north of the Waitaki River.
First proposed in 1862, Will was one of the leading advocates for church union, while his old shipmate, the Reverend William Bannerman, led the anti-faction. Now in the end, it was 1901 before the 2 church bodies finally merged, and throughout that 40 years, Will and Bannerman maintained a staunch, if friendly, opposition to each other on this and numerous other church matters. William Will retired from ministry in 1899 after 45 years service on the Taieri. And when he died in 1912, aged 87, he was the very last survivor of Otago's pioneer ministers.